First of all, good afternoon. I'm a little bit stunned. I've been doing this for decades, and I'm a little bit stunned about what I'm about to say and what I've seen happening in a country that I've practiced law in for over 4 decades and represented people who have had the opportunity to come before their peers, go before the government and people where the truth can be heard and people can decide fundamental fairness and human rights. And all of a sudden, I am faced with something our president just did, Biden, where there's a press release talking about sanctions that mark Human Rights Day and International Anti-Corruption Day, one day of the year. And I'm reading about what they did, and frankly, it makes me sad that I'm a lawyer practicing in this country when I see these kinds of things. When I look at this press release, it says that the Treasury sanctions of the United States, they're committed to taking actions consistent with values and recognizes that respect for human rights is a prerequisite for global peace, security, and prosperity. And the president, our president, has taken action, he says, I guess, globally to make sure that human rights are preserved. And I say by way of background, this comes on the heels of our government releasing Victor Bout, the merchant of death from the Soviet Union that was selling tens of thousands of arms to kill Americans, for the release of one of our basketball players who had cannabis oils in vape cigarettes. In this press release, which is frankly shocking, they talk about various countries that have been linked to sanctions against human rights. Korea, North Korea, they talk about forced labor, torture, and other human rights violations. That's all our country does, is talk about it and do nothing. They talk about corruption in, for example, Iran, where they're killing women, they're killing females because they're arrested by the morality police for not wearing hijabs. Murders going all over the country. Afghanistan, killing our Marines, leaving thousands and thousands of Americans there, giving them billions of arms so Al-Qaeda can go out and kill innocent people. And we have this. One of the things I want the listeners to know, and I'm prepared to answer any questions, and of course my counsel, Mr. Medrano, is, and certainly our esteemed colleagues, our lawyers in the Philippines. Our system of justice in the United States is based on something called a presumption of innocence. Someone gets accused of something, a crime, and they have the right to be heard. Our system in the United States, and what happened here to the Kingdom of Jesus Christ and Pastor Quiboloy, was federal prosecutors brought a number of witnesses, like 14, in front of a federal grand jury. They asked them questions about the church, the kingdom, the pastor, and other people. The accused doesn't have the right to listen to them. They don't have a right to have their lawyers question these people that are accusing them. And all of a sudden, there are formal charges brought against the kingdom and the pastor and other people. And now I look at this press release. It's hard for me to believe this is coming from the United States. The Treasury Department, if you look at what they say about serious human rights abuse in the Philippines, if you turn the page, it says for more than a decade, Apollo Quiboloy engaged in serious human rights abuse. They've convicted him already. I got 14 dissidents as opposed to over 3 million people whose lives he has saved, whose children, parents, grandparents, orphans, he's provided clothing, food, and housing around the world. In the Children's Joy Foundation, this article by our Treasury Department has convicted him. Engaged in serious human rights abuse, including a pattern of systematic and pervasive rape of girls as young as 11. Who says so? They've already convicted him. What country am I living in? There are countries where you get accused, they go into your house, they take you out, nobody ever sees you again. It's hard for me to believe that I can see something where human rights, people's rights to be heard, the presumption of innocence no longer exists. Russia, our president, our country, watched 150,000 Russian troops go on the border of Ukraine, and they bombed children, your parents, your grandparents, elderly. They bomb hospitals, and we give them billions of dollars for oil. Iran, billions of dollars for oil. I mean, our president talks the talk, he just doesn't walk the walk. And now they've convicted the pastor of the kingdom, who's won the highest awards the Philippine government has for the Children's Joy Foundation. He has saved lives, millions of lives, over 3 decades of saving people. And our country has the audacity in this press release to say he's guilty of these charges. That's not the American way. It is so offensive to see a press release where he has been convicted of charges where 14 dissidents who we believe stole from the church, stole from the college, were given free educations, free housing for themselves and their parents, and in return for accusing him, they were given visas to stay in the United States, given money to live, and food and jobs. I mean, the main accuser was basically living in the streets with his parents in Nepal. And he wound up with the kingdom in Davao City as the head of the Apollo Air. And we believe we caught him stealing from the church, stealing from children, stealing their money. And he testifies against the kingdom and the pastor. I have to tell you, folks, that, you might think, listen, they're lawyers. You got Green, you got Medrano, you got your Filipino lawyers. Their job is to protect their clients and say they didn't do anything. If you read this press release, they've convicted him already. He's never been heard. The government just agreed to continue this case for another year. This is something that I never thought would happen in this country. Ever. I never would believe this. And I can tell you something, the team of lawyers we have, if the government of the United States thinks we're giving up and we're holding our hands and say, oh my God, what are we going to do? They got another thing coming. This is not what we believe is the presumption of innocence. We believe is fundamental fairness of the accused to be heard. I apologize worldwide and to the press and the people in the Philippines for this country of ours, where we have a president who runs from answering questions to the press. It's just a sad commentary on what our system of jurisprudence has come to today. And I'll let Counsel Medrano, and you should know when he speaks, he can introduce himself. He's a former federal prosecutor. He knows the system. So he'll tell you why he's engaged in this case, and I welcome any comments from our local counsel in the Philippines, but I have to tell you, folks, this is unheard of in our country to have the Treasury Department being told by our president to say that the pastor of the kingdom has done these things when the people who have accused him have lied over and over again, and I caught him lying, and I got all the documents. They're not worthy of belief. I'm sorry to go so long, but I'm just incensed. I spent 4 decades representing and defending people. I've never seen this before. So, Counsel Medrano or anyone else, if you want to add anything, I mean, we've seen our country ignore human rights violations, the killing of people, and we do nothing but talk about it. And now they say our pastor here is guilty of these horrible crimes. So I defer to you, Counsel, and anyone else that wants to share, or if you have any questions for me before they say what they need to say, I'll be happy to answer them.
All right, thank you, Attorney Michael Green. Before the questions coming from our members of the media here in the Philippines, let's have Attorney Manny Medrano, also another lawyer of the Pastoral Policy Quiboloy. Good afternoon, Attorney Manny Medrano.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Manny Medrano, a lawyer out of Los Angeles, and it's my privilege and honor to represent the pastor with regard to these false allegations, these false criminal charges that have been instituted against him. This press release, this document, frankly, is outrageous. It's simple grandstanding. It's utter politics by the United States government. And it's embarrassing, as my colleague, Mr. Green, shared with you. It's simply embarrassing that a country like the United States, a country of the magnitude of the United States, to issue this press release sanctioning the pastor for alleged human rights violations is beyond the pale. What is so outrageous about this, and Mr. Green touched on this briefly already, is this document presents and acts as if the pastor has been convicted. They're mere allegations. They're simple charges. They're mere allegations that we submit are false. They're not true. The pastor has not been convicted of anything. And that's why this is so outrageous, that based on mere allegations and conjecture, the U.S. government has the temerity and the audacity to sanction the pastor for purported human rights violations. And it's so extraordinary because the U.S. is known worldwide for its commitment for the protection of people's rights, for its commitment for due process for individuals. And all this document does, in all candor, is to further malign the good name of Pastor Quiboloy, a man who has dedicated his entire life to God, who's dedicated his entire life to his community, and his entire life to his fellow man worldwide. Let me explain how outrageous this is. If an individual, not the U.S. government, but if an individual stood in front of a courthouse steps and made these same allegations and charges, you could sue that person for defamation and libel. The government has immunity. You can't sue them. Mr. Green and I know the federal prosecutors involved in this case with regard to the pastor. If those individuals stood in front of the U.S. federal courthouse in Los Angeles and made the same allegations, they would be fired. And they'd be fired because they know you cannot make these types of allegations without giving the pastor his right and opportunity to present his case in a court of law. It is so ironic that it's the U.S. that is sanctioning the pastor, and they say they're doing it in this press release to promote accountability. Well, my question to the U.S. government, everyone, is where's the accountability for the United States when issuing sanctions like these for mere charges and allegations? Let me finish by saying this. I'm an American. I love my country. But today I'm embarrassed because I'm in a country where millions have died on the battlefield to defend the U.S. Constitution, where millions have died to defend the rights of individuals to due process. And how can a government, a country like the U.S., with that rich history of protecting rights and due process, issue a press release like this? It's beyond the pale. It's an outrage. It's grandstanding. And frankly, it's a sad day for the United States. Thank you.